My first lure caught fish, which was a pike caught from my local river, took a spinner, and I'm one of thousands of anglers that can also say that the first fish that they caught on a lure took a spinner. It's a lure that's been around for over 100 years and it's not really had that many tweaks to the design. It's a lure that's often neglected these days in favour of more modern lures such as soft baits and various hard baits too. But in the right situations, a spinner can be deadly effective. And in this basics video, I'm going to show you how I like to fish a lure that has stood the test of time. If you haven't seen a spinner, then it's a very easy lure to recognise, as it's basically a blade that rotates around the central shaft that's weighted. And what happens is when you retrieve the lure, the pressure of the water hitting that blade causes it to rotate around the shaft and create lots of flash and vibration. If you look closer at the detail of a spinner as well, sometimes they often come fitted with glass beads. This one here's got a red bead at the end. And then also a dressing of feathers, bucktail, marabou, mylar around the treble or single hook that you're using, just to add a little bit more attraction to the lure. And that's essentially it. As I've mentioned, this is one of the oldest types of lures out there. In fact, it has a history going back to the 19th century. And really, it hasn't changed a great deal in that time. It has been refined in areas, and there are lots of variations of spinners now, and that's what I'm going to show you over the course of today. One of the main things to consider when choosing a spinner is the style of blade that it comes fitted with. And in the Fox Rage range there are two types of spinners, each with their own style of blade. So I'll start with the French spinner, and this is fitted with what's called a Colorado shaped blade. This is a wider style design with more of a curve, and it creates a lot of vibration, and you can also fish it that bit slower as well. So it's a great lure for fishing in the winter months when the water temperatures are cooler. Moving on to the UV spinner range, these are fitted with what's called a willow leaf shaped blade, which is a much more streamlined shape, and it's great for fishing that bit faster, and it also cuts through weed better as well, so it's especially effective in the summer months. The UV spinners also come fitted with coloured blades as well, so there are 3 different colours within the range, and these are great for fishing in coloured water conditions. One of the key things you'll notice with the Rage spinner designs, as well as many others out there, are the dressings on the back of the treble hook. Now these can be made from bucktail, marabou, even wool, but basically it just gives the spinner even more movement. And you'll often notice that the colour of the dressing on the back of the lure is often red, and the reason for that is to imitate blood that may be trailing from the spinner, or as a pike, perch, zander or chub will hopefully think of it, an injured fish. Most spinners come fitted with treble hooks, but if you're fishing somewhere that's weedy, you can always just take the treble off and replace it with a single. This will help you catch far less weed, and it's also commonly used by mullet anglers, targeting them in the sea. In the French blade spinner range there are 5 different sizes, starting with the smallest, which is 3.6 gram, 5.2 grams, 7 grams, 9.6 grams, and the largest, which is size 5 at 14.3 grams. In the UV spinner range, there are two different sizes. The smallest is 11 grams and the largest is 26 grams. The great thing about a spinner is that you know when it's working properly when you can feel the vibrations through the rod tip of the blade rotating round the shaft. Today I've predominantly been fishing with the French spinner, which has got a Colorado blade, and the reason for that is because it's cooling down now. We're in November and I'm able to fish this really slowly, and at times I've hardly been turning the reel handle. That's been enough to get that blade spinning. And by fishing really slowly and close to the bottom, I think that's helped me pick up a couple more fish today. The spinner is a very simple lure to fish, and I'm going to show you how I like to retrieve them. But the first thing I should point out before I cast out is always be ready for a bite on the drop. And the reason for this is because as a spinner is sinking to the bottom, that blade is rotating and flashing, and that's often when you'll get a bite, so be ready. So I'll cast out. The great thing about the spinner is that it can be fished at a variety of different depths, and you can count it down and start retrieving depending on how high or low in the water column that you'd like to fish it. So in this case I've actually let the lure hit the bottom. So what I like to do now is to just lift the rod a foot or two, just to get it away from any weed or snags close to the bottom, and then continue a steady retrieve all the way back to the bank. And as I'm retrieving that spinner, I'm just very slowly lowering the rod tip so that I'm keeping it fairly close to the bottom. And the closer that the lure gets to the bank, obviously if I get a bite, that's going to give me more leverage to strike and set the hooks. I hope you've learned something new today about how to fish the humble spinner. It's a lure that often gets forgotten about now, but as you can see here, it still works.